The Circular Economy of Rags, Li Lu's Early Years and the Compounding of Human Capital. Part 2. The Stinking Ninth and the Fragility of Life. By the 1970s, China's social structure was rigidly defined by the class status of your family. There were the 5 red categories: workers, peasants, soldiers, who were safe, and the 5 black categories: landlords, rich farmers, counter-revolutionaries, bad elements, rightists, who were persecuted. Intellectuals were often mocked as the stinking ninth category, placed at the very bottom of the social ladder, even below criminals. Li Lu's parents were intellectuals, which meant the family was socially radioactive. They had no political capital, meaning they had no protection from the state or neighbors. Let's start the next chapter. A week after I left hospital, my father came to collect me. "We can't keep the child any longer," said the head of the kindergarten. "When we agreed to take him, we were doing you a favor. We would not normally accept a child of such terrible family background." I lost the only real home I had known for 3 years because of my family, and as my father carried me away on his bicycle, I wondered where I would be sent next. It took me many years to figure out what this terrible family background was. They can do anything to you if your background is bad. My mother was from a landowning family, and that's bad. My father listened to a foreign broadcast on the radio and someone overheard it, so they accused him of being a spy. That's even worse. Since the Cultural Revolution, all intellectuals have been considered useless. They, like my parents, who had been to universities, were put into the lowest, the stinking ninth category. Pause. Li Lu is expelled from kindergarten not for what he did, but for who his parents are. The label stinking ninth dehumanized intellectuals, turning education, usually an asset, into a liability. Back to the book. Da Pa and Da Ma, Big Mum, had 6 sons. Lao Da, elder one, was 15 or 16. Lao elder 2, was 13. Xiao San, little 3, had died in infancy, but his memory was preserved. Xiao Shi, little 4, was a couple of years older than me, and the twins Xiao Wu, little 5, and Xiao Liu, little 6, a year younger. Dapa was very strict with his children. They looked on him with awe. He often told them, "'Cause no trouble but learn more words." That was how he taught his children. He rarely beat them, and they were obedient, honest, and did well in their studies. Pause. 'Cause no trouble but learn more words. Dapa understands the paradox of his time. Education is dangerous now, but it is the only way out in the long run. He is a miner with bad lungs. He knows his body is failing. He is betting on the minds of his children. Back to the book, Dapa's house was as nondescript as the next, its gabled tar paper roof and gray cinder block walls no match for the rough sand brick or top-quality steel brick of the city's better buildings. Dapa was proud of the strong reinforced concrete beam that ran the length of the building at the peak of the roof. It would never sag or break as a wooden beam would. There wasn't much space for 8 people, just 2 rooms and a small courtyard where Dama raised chickens. The front door led into a square kitchen, dominated by the huge stove that burned wood and coal and always held a big black pot or 2. Through a curtain was the room where we ate, slept, and lived. Running the length of the room and more than half its width was a long kang, the brick bed platform heated from below that is the focus of every traditional North Chinese home. When Dapa came home, she prepared some good food for him, though even that was not very good. He had worked for years in the mine and his wages were considered high, but with so many mouths to feed, each got only a little share. He was always very tired. He had a bad cough, but still smoked, and everyone took care of him when he came home. He did no housework, but would sit on the kang. Sometimes Dama offered him an egg which he ate uncooked, making a small hole in it with a nail and sucking out the inside. This was the best time of day for the whole family. We all crowded onto the same part of the kang. Elder 1 and Elder 2 did their homework. The other children helped Dama paste paper boxes. We would chat about everything under the sun. Sometimes Dapa would study the newspapers on the wall with us. Often, neighbors called in. Dama was kind-hearted, and she helped anyone with problems. She didn't care for gossip, but people liked to talk to her about their worries or grievances. I would lie on my stomach on the kang, with my feet up in the air, and listen. Pause. We are introduced to the neighbors, showing the different ways people coped with the era. Some, like Big Fool's father, collapsed under the pressure. Back to the book. 4 or 5 families lived in our little street. Dapa's family was in the middle. To the west of us lived Big Fool and his parents. A typical miner's family. His father was an alcoholic who always carried a little bottle of cheap sweet potato gin. His red eyes bulged, his eyelids were swollen and droopy. He was only in his 40s, but he looked older and was already completely bald. The family had almost nothing. Big Fool grew up to be very strong and robust. He was stout and big, taller than anyone else in his age group. He wore a quilted jacket tied at the waist with a rope and hardly felt the cold. His head was shaved in the old-fashioned way, with a small clump on the forehead and heavy eyebrows like his father's. Big Fool had been backward since birth and stammered. He still wet the bed in his teens. His mother would put the quilt out to dry, and everyone saw that Big Fool had wet the bed again. They laughed at him. He loved to stand on the garbage heap and look into the women's side of the latrine. One day he was seen by Aunt Zhang, who sneaked up behind him and poured a bucket of urine over him. For a long time after, people would ask him, "How did you feel with all that urine on you? Didn't it smell?" He would say, No, it didn't smell." People found this hilarious. They would say to his face, "No, it didn't smell." He had big eyes that could look alarmed, but generally he had a foolish smile on his face. He had lost one of his front teeth, and wind whistled through the gap whenever he spoke. Big Fool's father had come to Tangshan from a small village and was very strong. He worked in the mine as an apprentice to Big Fool's mother's father. He often helped with the household chores and, since the parents had only 3 daughters, they accepted their young apprentice as an adopted son and later agreed that he married one of the daughters. He was very hard-working and quite good-looking, but he had a violent temper and already drank too much. Originally it was planned that he marry the eldest daughter, but she found someone else and eloped. Big Fool's mother and Dama were good friends, and she often told Dama of her suffering as they sewed under a dim light in winter. "Look what a good family you have," she would say. "Your children listen to you and look up to you. Your husband doesn't drink and never beats you." One day, when I came back from school, she was talking about her former boyfriend who was well off. She said, "Only because I listened to my father and took a wrong step." She was a typical Chinese woman who stoically bore everything that came her way. She cried and sighed with Dama, her only relief in this hard life. She said her husband was not a bad person. Sometimes he was good to his son and her. If only she could earn some money and buy him plenty of liquor and good food, then he would be good-tempered. In summer, Big Fool's father liked to play cards. The men turned over a big shallow iron bowl and used it for card games. At the end of the night, the one who lost would have to balance the bowl on his head and walk from one lamppost to the next, up and down the block, without dropping it. Usually at midnight you would hear shouts and clapping, and you knew someone was undergoing this ordeal. It wasn't easy, and often the loser ended up crawling on all fours so as not to let the bowl fall off. The men did not like to play with Big Fool's father because he would not carry the bowl when he lost, but he loved playing cards, especially when he had no money to buy liquor. When he lost, he became unreasonable, and when he won, conceited and arrogant. Once we had a fight with some other children from our street. During this fight, Big Fool shouted, "Your father is a spy." After the fight, Dapa punished all his sons except me. I cried and asked him, "Aren't you my pa? Why did they say my pa is a spy? Are you a spy?" Dapa said, "I am your pa. Just ignore what Big Fool said. You know he's a fool. He talks stupid nonsense." "There is this other man. I also call him pa," I said. "Who is he? Is he a spy?" "Don't think about it, child. You stay here. Nobody can do anything to you. If anyone wants to bully you, you have me here." Big Fool's mother came over and apologized, saying, "Don't listen to Big Fool. It's not true that your father is a spy." She caressed my head and said, "He's such a nice, intelligent boy, but pitiful." I felt pained at heart. Pause. Big Fool repeats the propaganda of the state. "Your father is a spy," without understanding it. This shows how deep the political indoctrination went. Even the village idiot knew the political slogans. Then we meet the villains, the Zhangs. They represent the neighborhood committee, the lowest level of government administration in China, which wielded immense power over daily life. Food rations, permits, housing. This section shows how private misery and public ideology reinforce each other. Big Fool's family is wrecked not by politics directly, but by poverty, alcoholism, and inherited brutality. Yet state language seeps in anyway. Big Fool parrots, "Your father is a spy," without comprehension, proving that propaganda doesn't need intelligence to spread, only repetition. Violence at home produces cruelty outside it. Humiliation becomes entertainment. Suffering normalizes suffering. The tragedy is cyclical. The father drinks to escape powerlessness, beats his wife, damages his son, and the son absorbs both the damage and the slogans of the state. When Big Fool calls Li Lu pitiful, it's unintentionally accurate. He's witnessing how an entire society teaches people to confuse dominance with survival and cruelty with truth. Back to the book. When I think of the Zhangs, I think of true evil. Aunt Zhang was the director of the neighborhood committee in our district. She was tall, thin, and ugly with a pockmarked face. Uncle Zhang, in sharp contrast to his wife, was short and fat. Both had small eyes, especially Uncle Zhang. When he smiled, they disappeared. He was of a younger generation of miners and didn't marry until he was well into his 30s. He was quite relieved to have a wife, even an ugly one from the countryside. Unlike Uncle Zhang, however, his wife was not unpopular when they were first married. She liked to visit friends and chat. She knew how to talk to people and made an effort to get to know their affairs. Uncle Zhang got going with the start of the Cultural Revolution in 1966. He knew he was looked down on but suppressed his anger. He became active in the struggle meetings, especially when it came to criticizing the old foreman. The old man was the previous foreman in the mine. Everyone still called him that even though he had no job now. Uncle Zhang criticized the old foreman until he was in tears. Workers were angry with Zhang, but the leadership liked it. When the old foreman was still in charge, he knew his workers well. He knew who worked hard and who didn't. He didn't like Zhang and never raised his wages. Zhang always hated him, and when he saw his chance, he took revenge on the old man. He said the old foreman exploited and oppressed the workers, drank the workers' blood, and served the Japanese invaders. Old Foreman was thus labeled a historical counter-revolutionary, a traitor, and a spy. Uncle Zhang is an opportunist. He used the chaos of the Cultural Revolution to settle personal scores. By accusing the old foreman of political crimes, he destroyed a good man to advance his own career. This was the mechanism of the terror, ordinary people turning on each other for personal gain. Uncle Zhang, on the other hand, was praised by the leadership. During the latter part of the Cultural Revolution, when propaganda teams were sent to monitor other work units, Zhang was assigned to be a member of the workers' propaganda team in a middle school. That was how Zhang got out of working in the pit, which most other miners could only dream about. Uncle Zhang soon became infamous. People despised him even more as he seemed to do nothing but eat fat pork. He gained the nickname Fat Pork Zhang. For the half year that he managed the dining hall at the middle school, the teachers said they never saw any pork and they understood where it was all going. The school leaders didn't like him, and Zhang was not interested in the work of the school, nor was he able to read or write. He called teachers stinking intellectuals. He was happy just to be out of the mines. He became fatter and looked like a ball. Not only did Uncle Zhang eat his fill at the school, he also took food home, and he and Aunt Zhang entertained various leaders with the stolen food. In the end, she got the post of director of the neighborhood committee. It wasn't a highly paid job, but gave her a lot of power. Ration tickets were required to buy such things as meat, fish, bean curd, and vegetables that were in short supply. If she didn't like you, she could simply tell you that she lost them or that she did not get enough tickets from the district government. She also controlled residence registration. If the police found out that you didn't have the proper stamp on your papers, you became a black person and could be thrown in jail. Her close connection with the police gave her further power. When the police wanted information, they would go to the neighborhood committee and ask who were vagabonds, who criminals, who was not behaving properly, who had uttered counter-revolutionary remarks, etc. No evidence was required. If the director wanted to harm someone, she could fabricate a story and the victim would be interrogated and prosecuted. Pause. Aunt Zhang controls the hukou, residence registration, and ration tickets. In a planned economy, you couldn't buy food without tickets, and you couldn't live in the city without a hukou. This gave her the power of life and death over her neighbors. What makes the Zhangs truly dangerous is not theft but control of choke points. Aunt Zhang's power doesn't come from violence. It comes from paperwork, food, housing, legality itself all pass through her hands. In a planned economy, administration is power. Losing a ration ticket means hunger. Losing a hukou means erasure. No trial is needed. Accusation is enough. This is why ordinary cruelty becomes systemic terror. People like the Zhongs don't need ideology to believe in it. Only incentives. They demonstrate the core lesson of the era. When institutions rot, the worst people rise fastest, because the system selects for obedience upward and brutality downward. Back to the book. After she became director, Aunt Jang was a changed person. The only thing unchanged about her was that she still went visiting. She was like a spy poking her nose into other people's business and then reporting to the leadership in order to win favor and promotion. Nobody noticed it, and they began to play cards on top of the portrait. Fat Jang and his wife came by. As soon as she was near, she screamed, "What? You're playing on a picture of Chairman Mao." Big Fool's father, already cross because he was losing, exploded. "What are you screaming about? What picture of Chairman Mao?" He hadn't noticed it, as from where he was sitting, it was upside down. Aunt Jang insisted, "Of course there's a picture of Chairman Mao on the paper. Of course there is." Big Fool's father said, "We're not playing anymore." He stood up and tore the newspaper, and as it tore, he saw the picture. People were afraid of the Jangs, but not Big Fool's father. He reckoned he was from a good family background and didn't have to be afraid of anyone. He would curse anyone who came his way, and, besides, he had always hated the Jangs, but now Aunt Jang had her chance. The next day, 2 policemen in white uniforms visited Big Fool's house. Everyone came out to watch. After the police left, sounds of things being thrown around and broken came from Big Fool's house. Neighbors ventured in. Da Pa, Da Ma, and I went in too. Big Fool's father was still cursing Aunt Jang. "You vixen, you bitch, you witch! Why shouldn't I have the freedom to play cards? You reported me. For 3 generations in my family we are poor peasants. Why should we be afraid of you?" Pause. Big Fool's father thinks his poor peasant background protects him, but he fails to realize that disrespecting Mao, tearing the picture, is a counter-revolutionary crime that trumps his class background. Big Fool's father misreads the system. He believes class origin is a shield, that being a poor peasant grants immunity. But in this world, symbols outrank substance. Disrespecting Mao outweighs decades of correct background. Aunt Jang understands this perfectly. Ideology is not a conviction, but a weapon, deployed selectively to crush people who refuse deference. What's lethal here is the asymmetry. Big Fool's father shouts openly, convinced of his safety. Aunt Jang says nothing and calls the police. One relies on truth and identity, the other on procedure. In that mismatch, procedure always wins. Back to the book. As he raged on, his wife told us what the police had said. He was ordered to write a self-criticism and told not to go to work until they thought it was good enough. If he didn't write a good self-criticism, he would probably end up in prison. He had committed 2 crimes. The first, his vicious attack on the picture of the great leader Chairman Mao. The second, his rude behavior towards a revolutionary cadre, namely Aunt Jang. Da Pa told the crowd to go away and brought Big Fool's parents over to our house to discuss how to handle this. Big Fool's father got himself a bottle of liquor, cursing all the while. "Is this the new society?" he asked. "Have I lost even the right to play cards? This is worse than the old society." His wife said, "Do you really mean that you don't want to live anymore? You tore up a picture of Chairman Mao, and now you curse the new society. So you really must be ready to die. You are destroying the whole family." He retorted, "What are you telling me? Have I lost the right to curse too?" His wife snatched the bottle from him, saying, "The trouble has all come from your drinking. Look what you've become." He slapped his wife hard across the face and said, "I don't have the right to play cards. I don't have the right to curse. Now you are trying to deprive me of my right to drink." Da Pa went over and said to him, "Look at yourself. Look how much trouble you've brought to your family. If you were put in prison, not only would your life be damaged, but also the life of your wife and son." These words shook him. He heaved a long sigh and cried to Da Pa, "What a time we are living in. What can we do? You all scold me for drinking. But what can I do if I stop drinking? At work no one talks to me. They think I'm scum. I won't flatter the leadership like Fat Zhang does. I earn my money. But now I'm worn out. I've got the same disease as you, brother. I don't think I'll be able to work much longer. What will I do then?" I have a good wife and I owe so much to her. But my son is not clever. Big Fool knows nothing. He doesn't even know how to talk properly. How can I depend on him? Finally, he calmed down. Dapa made a pot of tea for him, and then the two men smoked and started to talk about how to get over the difficulty. At last, they came up with an idea. Dama would go with Big Fool's father to Aunt Zhang with gifts. Aunt Zhang respected Dama. When Aunt Zhang first came to this area, she was looked down on. She was ugly and nobody liked Fat Zhang. But Dama was good to her. So Big Fool's father went to the Zhangs with Dama, and the Zhang spoke to the police. That was that. Pause. This shows the importance of Guangxi relationships. Dama had built genuine goodwill with Aunt Zhang over the years. Now she spends that social capital to save her neighbor's life. This is Guangxi as a substitute for justice. There is no appeal, no evidence, no law to argue, only relationships to activate. Big Fool's father doesn't escape punishment by being right, innocent, or historically red, but because Dama had quietly accumulated trust when it cost her nothing. That stored goodwill becomes a form of currency, spent in a moment of crisis to override procedure and ideology. The system is arbitrary and lethal, yet paradoxically porous. Rules are absolute on paper but negotiable through personal ties. Survival depends not on virtue or legality, but on whether someone with standing is willing to vouch for you. Back to the book. Even though the Zhangs were powerful now, they didn't stop being cruel to the old foreman. By then, he was well over 60. Dapa said he had been to school when he was young, and at the mine was foreman in charge of developing new tools and safety measures. After liberation in 1949, he lost his position, but people were good to him, and he was kind. When the Cultural Revolution came, though, he was repeatedly criticized. Fat Zhang took the lead in accusing him, and the list of his crimes increased daily. In the end, he was expelled from the mine. His house was confiscated, and his only son driven out. His wife had already died. He was all alone, and the endless struggle meetings had almost driven him insane. Now he bowed and smiled to everyone he saw. Even children would command him to stand at attention and shout, "Long live Chairman Mao." He would stand very straight and shout, "Long live Chairman Mao." He had no job, so he had become a rag picker. He had lost his house, so he built a tiny mud shed, so small that his kang took up half the space in it. The other half was filled with all the trash he had picked, which he would sell to the dealer once every 2 weeks. Aunt Zhang often said to him, "Hey, old foreman, you've encouraged young people to do bad things recently, haven't you?" He would stand there saying, "Yes, yes, I haven't behaved properly." Aunt Zhang didn't know what to do with him. She said, "Remember, you must behave properly." He would say, "Yes, yes, I'll behave properly." I liked him. I would go to his shed. In the evening he did nothing but catch lice. He had only a ragged quilted jacket, which he wore all year round and never washed. His eyesight was weak, and he had a hard time finding the lice, but he did the job very seriously and carefully. He was very excited when he found one and made a great fuss about killing it. It was as if all he could do was bully the lice because he was bullied by everybody. When he saw Dama, he stopped behaving as he did with others and became melancholy. Dama and he would talk about his son. As his family had been quite well off in the past, his son was not used to roughing it. He was married to a country girl, whose family looked down on him, because he knew nothing about farm work. The old man needed his son to take care of him and had long wanted him to come to the city, but he could not get over the hurdle of the Zhangs. Aunt Zhang refused to issue a residence card. Once the old foreman fell seriously ill. Only Dama went to look after him, and sometimes I went along. She heated the kang for him. He cried over his ill luck. "I don't know how I have offended the Zhangs so that they would not let my son stay with me." Dama sympathized with the old man and went to talk to Aunt Zhang about letting his son come to the city. She took me along with her. Aunt Zhang said to Dama, "Actually, I have a lot of sympathy for him, although the old foreman treated my husband badly in the old days. But the refusal of his son's request comes from the leadership above me. The old foreman is a counter-revolutionary. How can we sympathize with a class enemy? You must not have anything to do with him. Big sister, we are good friends. You must be careful. Keep away from him." She pretended to be very concerned about Dama, but really she was giving her a warning. When Dama came back, she said to Dapa, "People change when they become officials." I didn't quite understand her point at that time. But Dapa understood. He told his sons never to get involved in politics. Pause. The old foreman is a tragic figure, completely broken by the system. He has lost everything: job, house, son, dignity. Dapa's advice to his sons, never get involved in politics, is the lesson drawn from watching this man's destruction. This is what total defeat looks like in a political system that needs victims to justify itself. The old foreman isn't punished for what he does, but for what he represents: competence, memory, dignity before the revolution. Once broken, he is kept alive only to model submission. His endless bowing, chanting, and self-accusation are not compliance, they are survival reflexes. Even cruelty loses interest in him because there is nothing left to extract. What makes this unbearable is that punishment never ends. Even stripped of work, home, family, and sanity, he is still monitored, still warned, still denied reunion with his son. Aunt Zhang's language is the system perfected: feigned sympathy paired with threat, friendship paired with annihilation. Dapa's conclusion, never get involved in politics, is not cynicism. It's empirical wisdom. Watching a good man reduced to bullying lice is the clearest proof that in this world, proximity to power corrodes everything it touches. Back to the book. I couldn't like the Zhangs. No matter how I tried, I really felt for the old foreman. He always got up before daybreak, at 4 or 5 in the morning. Early risers sometimes saw and heard him sing. But if he saw anyone, he would stop. He had an erhu, a Chinese violin, with broken strings. It still hung on the wall. He would handle it lovingly now and then. The snatches of Beijing opera he sang were all from the Romance of Three Kingdoms. I often went to see him and listened to his stories. Once, when some children tried to bully him, I fought them off. It was then that he told me the story of Jing Ke, a hero who lived long ago in the state of Yan, when the king of Qin, now renowned for his terracotta army, prepared to invade the much smaller Yan, which could not defend itself against its more powerful neighbor. Jing Ke volunteered to go into the enemy's castle and assassinate the king of Qin. His people gave him a hero's send-off and he set off on his desperate mission. Posing as a turncoat, he came to the tyrant with a valuable map of Yan. As he unrolled the scroll for the greedy king of Qin, he pulled from it his dagger and leapt at the king. But the king's guards cut down Jing Ke. The king of Qin conquered Yan along with all its neighbors, and he started the Qin dynasty, 221-206 BC. But Jing Ke has lived in memory as the hero who braved death to defend his country's liberty. I sometimes went with the old foreman on his rounds. Once, when my head was still full of Jing Ke, he took me into an abandoned 4-story building where he went to pick through the rubbish. I was amazed and excited at the great dim space. "You could play here whenever you want," he said. "No one comes here." And that was how I found the castle, which became a stronghold for me and my friends. We liked to read picture books about fighting, and acted out the stories in our games, staging mock wars. We divided ourselves into 2 groups, the good guys and the bad. We made guns which could fire 3 or 4 shots like machine guns. During the day, we stayed in the stronghold, discussed what to attack, and made paper bullets. At night, we disguised ourselves and prepared for action, then attacked other groups who might be playing games in the street. In the castle, we built bunkers with bricks and tiles and shot from the gun holes. The paper bullets hurt if they met their mark, but couldn't do much harm. Soon, a lot of people gave up gang fighting and joined in this game. Pause. The castle represents a rare unmonitored space in a totalitarian society. Here, the children could create their own world. But even this is taken away. This passage shows how culture and imagination become refuge when politics strips everything else away. The old foreman singing at dawn, the broken erhu, and the fragments of Romance of the Three Kingdoms are acts of quiet resistance. Memory preserved in whispers. Jing Ke matters because he fails. Heroism here isn't victory, it's moral defiance in the face of overwhelming power. The castle grows directly out of that lesson. It's an unpoliced space where children replace street violence with rules, roles, and stories of their own making. For a moment, narrative restores order where authority has only destroyed it. That it will be taken away is inevitable, but its existence proves that even under total surveillance, human beings keep trying to build worlds that make sense. Back to the book. This life in the castle lasted a year or 2. Then an unexpected incident abruptly ended these games. One day we went to the castle and found the grass covered with paper smeared with blood. We were astonished and couldn't imagine what had happened. We were afraid too, so we walked away from it. The next day we saw more of the same paper smeared with blood. This happened several times. All the members of our guerrilla detachment went to see it, but nobody knew what it meant. The concept of sex was a mysterious one, and was always linked with mystery, crime, and evil. People talked about sex only in the most vulgar jokes. So when Little Frog suggested that this paper was to do with sex, everyone called him a hoodlum. He said he had evidence that parents used this kind of paper when they wanted to have a baby and made love. Finally, one day when we were going to the castle, we found that the entrance had been bricked up. In front of the blocked entrance hung a poster with 2 names marked by a big red cross. It was an announcement by the court, and many people were there discussing it. We hurried over. It was said that a man and a woman had been spending nights there together. They couldn't get a wedding certificate because their work unit would not give them approval. They couldn't wait any longer and chose our castle, a deserted building. The court accused the man of rape and the woman of being his accessory. The man was sentenced to 2 or 3 years in prison, and the woman to physical labor under the people's supervision outside the prison for 2 or 3 years. As we stood there, a crowd surged towards us. In front of the crowd was the young couple. The woman had a pair of worn-out shoes around her neck to show her defilement, and the man, while beating a gong, shouted, "I am a rapist! I am a rapist!" They tried to hide their faces, but in vain. Their expressions were very sad. The woman with the worn-out shoes looked so distressed. For a long while, none of us children said anything. We did not know what to think. We felt grieved partly because of the event, and partly because of the incomprehensible mystery surrounding it, and were sad that we had lost our castle. Pause. This era, you needed permission from your work unit, Danway, to get married. The state controlled even the most private aspects of life. This couple, denied permission, tried to find privacy in the ruins, and they were destroyed for it. This is the moment when the state reaches into the last unpoliced space and kills it. The children first encounter blood without explanation, because sex itself has been criminalized into silence and rumor. What is private becomes unspeakable, then retroactively defined as evil. The couple's crime is not violence, but impatience, choosing intimacy without permission. By relabeling love as rape, the system converts desire into deviance, and necessity into guilt. The public humiliation isn't about punishment, it's theater, meant to teach everyone that even abandoned ruins belong to power. The bricked-up castle is the final lesson. There is no outside, no neutral ground, no refuge where authority cannot follow. Back to the book. One day I heard that there had been an explosion in the mine. Dozens of miners were trapped. I was on my way home from school with little Five. The streets were almost empty. An old rag picker told us there had been an accident in the mine. We ran to it, and there we found Dama. She looked stunned. Her husband was among the dozens of miners down there. We waited a long time in silence. Then a whistle blew, and we saw about 10 miners emerge pushing carts. On the carts were bodies covered with white cloths. People dashed to the carts. Wives burst into tears when they found their husbands lying there. Those who did not find their husbands asked repeatedly where they were. When some discovered that their husbands were still alive, they fainted with joy. Dama and I looked hard, too. Suddenly we found Dapa on a cart. His face was blue, his mouth, nose, and ears full of coal cinders. He was cold and hard. Dama covered her face with her jacket and never uttered a sound. She collapsed. Throughout the night, neighbors came to see us. Everyone cried. They knew that suddenly this family had lost its pillar. What would they do now? A family of 6 children and a mother. People cried their hearts out. After midnight, they tried to persuade us to go to sleep. Dama tried not to make a sound. The next morning, her eyes looked like 2 big peaches. She told us children to stay at home and not go to school. She went alone to lay out Dapa. She washed him and wrapped his body in the white cloth bought with money provided by the neighbors. Then the body was taken to be cremated. But Dama didn't want this. She was from the country and was superstitious about cremation. Even when the order came that the body must be cremated, Dama still refused to let it go. An official came. At first he tried to comfort us by saying that Dapa was a very good person who had died while performing his duty for the country and the revolution. Dama cried and asked him to give her back her husband. In the end, Dapa was cremated because the leader insisted. The day of the funeral procession, Dama cursed herself for not being able to prevent the cremation. After Dapa's death, the family collapsed. We had nothing left. The mine gave us a few hundred yuan and did not even explain what caused the accident. Dama and some other widows tried to appeal to the court for several years, but nothing happened. Very soon the family had nothing to eat. At first our neighbors gave us some food, but who could afford to support another family for long? Elder 1 was 15. He took his father's place and became a miner. The day before he went down the pit, Dama was very sad. She said, "Your father died. I am helpless now. If I had any other way out, I would not let you go down into the pit. This is not work for human beings. The leaders are not human." The other children all stopped going to school. Every day they went out to pick cabbage, gather firewood, select partly burnt briquettes, and sell ice lollies. I could no longer stay with them. Pause. The death of Dapa is the total collapse of the family's economic foundation. In a system without real insurance or social safety nets, the loss of the primary breadwinner meant destitution. Elder 1, only 15, has to go into the very mine that killed his father. This is where ideology fully gives way to brute reality. Dapa doesn't die heroically for the revolution. He dies anonymously, reduced to a covered body on a cart, his cause never explained. The language of honor arrives only to silence questions, not to offer justice. Once he's gone, the system provides a token payout and then disappears, revealing how thin the social contract really is. The family's collapse is immediate and mechanical. No income, no appeal, no recourse. Just hunger. Elder 1 entering the mine at 15 is the cruelest symmetry of all. The machine that killed the father simply consumes the son next. This is not tragedy as exception, it's tragedy as design, showing how a society without safety nets converts death into inheritance. That concludes Chapter 2. This is Avi. Like and subscribe. On to the next.